The Mindbuzz Podcast.
Antony, we're here.
Yeah, we made it.
We finally made it. We had
We
a little technical difficulties at the beginning of this podcast, but we started. We're here.
Mm.
I have Antony Rotunno in the house on the Mindbuzz podcast, host of the Glass Onion podcast, Life and Life Only podcast, and Film Gold. He's a musician. He's a English teacher and all around badass. Antony, welcome. Welcome. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing very well. Thank you very much. Yeah, I might be interrupting to have occasional slurps of coffee here because I woke up very early this morning actually to watch the boxing from last night.
Oh, okay.
So yeah. Anyway, that's another story. But yeah,
Right.
yeah. Was that my very first episode? I just heard
That was your very first episode. Was that you actually on singing that song or
Yeah, it's one of my songs. Yeah.
Nice,
Yeah.
nice. Okay. Yeah, I
I
was
thought it.
No, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say I thought you might like that one because it might fit the vibe of the show slightly. You
No,
know, questioning opinions and things like that.
It did. I
Mm.
heard a little bit of your introduction of Life and Life Only on Pods Like
Mm.
Us over there from Marv's side of the podcasting world, and so tell me a little bit before we jump into the John Lennon portion of this episode. Go ahead and just talk about your podcast, the three of them. So go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. So Life and Life Only is the title is actually a Bob Dylan lyric from one of his early songs, but it's nothing to do with Bob Dylan. It's on the blurb for it says a search for inner and outer truth, and I understand that searching for the truth is a very dangerous thing.
Yeah, these days, right?
So it's not. Yes, it's not looking for because these days there's 10,000 truths.
Yeah.
But it's not searching for the truth, but it's searching for little bits of truth here and there. Questioning mainstream narratives, but then it's very eclectic as well, because I kind of say that it's about life. So when you've got podcasts about life, you can pretty much do anything you want. But
Right.
it's kind of held together by two strands. Inner truth is kind of on the self-development side, and then outer truth is about like I said, mainstream narratives. But you can kind of tie those two things together, because if you're kind of armor plated yourself, then you're maybe better at negotiating what's becoming an extremely tricky sort of information landscape. Very tricky. So that's that one. Film Gold is about films. That's kind of the third podcast of my three, in that the other two, as I've sent to you just before, they take so much energy that's become that's kind of just pure fun. And we tend towards classic films. My favorite period is the kind of Hollywood of the 70s, and then the old stuff like Hitchcock. And that's those two. And then, as you said, Glass Onion on John Lennon is basically a deep dive into John Lennon. Sometimes it's general Beatles as well, because it's quite hard to keep it going just on one guy, especially one guy who hasn't been around for 40 years. So yeah, that's the three. And then music, I'm kind of retired, to be honest. Most of the recordings I've ever done, apart from home stuff, was in a 5-year period in Madrid.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, it was quite interesting. I made my first album when I was 40 years old, and then I made two more in quick succession, and we did 2 live albums. So, and I've got loads of stuff online, which maybe I'll tell you about later. But
Yeah.
I've got tons of live performances and demos.
Oh,
and stuff.
really?
There's a lot out there. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. That you have to send that to me so we can put that at the bottom of the show notes. So if anybody is inclined to check that out.
Yeah, and the music, I've used the music for my podcast as well. All my podcasts are songs that I did, sometimes with the vocal taken off, because I don't know. Podcast music maybe it's better without vocals. I don't know. I'm sure there's some great ones that have vocals, but
Yeah,
it's kind of just letting the music introduce the vibe of the show,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Although,
I did, and I did very in fact liked the first introduction, and that's why I had to add it to this one because
Mm,
just the vibe was great and the lyrics were they're fascinating and uh
yeah,
yeah, they were great. I really enjoyed it.
yeah. Just when I listened back, because I changed the music about 25 or 30 episodes in,
Okay.
and when I listened back to it, I was kind of thinking, well, your average podcast listener who's listening in,
Yeah.
the first thing they're going to hear is someone saying, "Oh, people are fools who believe what they read and believe what they see," which I'm fine with, because I'm including myself.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that I'm just as capable of being fooled by propaganda, although I probably
Yeah.
slightly less just because I'm aware of it. Once you're aware of it, that's 50% of the battle, probably. So it's quite funny. I don't really listen back to those early ones, but occasionally, I might listen to 10
Mhm.
minutes of one just for curiosity.
Just
Yeah.
travel back in time just a little bit, which you do
Mm.
travel a little bit backward on the Glass Onion. Great logo, by the way. I love the artwork that's
Yeah.
on the album artwork that's on for that podcast. But we've been talking about doing this for a few months now, and I know Marv has been behind the scenes a little bit on
Yeah.
getting us together and getting this going, and he heard a couple of snippets on Mindbuzz, and especially that video that I put out about John Lennon being a shithead with
Yeah.
Brian from Concerts That Made Us. And he
Mm.
sent after he seen that video, he actually he emailed me, or he sent me a message on one of the social media platforms that him and I have. And he said, you know what? If you really want to nail down on the psychology of John Lennon with drug use, with his musical style, with his basic life, uh,
Mm.
look no further. You need to talk to Antony Rotunno from the Glass Onion podcast, and
Yeah.
he put us together on I don't know if it was it's not Instagram, but it was a Facebook. I think it was Facebook. Yeah, it was Facebook, and that's
Yeah.
how you and I connected. And we've been talking about this for a few months, getting the dates straight between you and I, and you know, time zones also, and waiting for our days to line up, and they've lined up
Yeah.
now. So we're here now, and yeah, it's been awesome, very anticipated time for right now. So
Well,
thanks.
once we've done it, it's out there forever. So then
Yeah, exactly.
the fact that it took a while doesn't make any difference
Yeah,
because
Yeah, you are absolutely right. But what did you think of that little clip? And I played it at the beginning of this podcast because that's something that I really didn't jump into. We'll talk about it a little bit further along in the podcast about how I got into the Beatles and John Lennon, especially because he's my favorite Beatle, and we'll talk about how you got into the Beatles and of course John Lennon. But I just want to say this, and I always say this about the Beatles when people ask me Beatles or Stones, I
Mm.
usually quit back and tell them, no, it's not Beatles or Stones. It's either Paul or John. That's how I quit back when people ask me. So it's all about the Beatles, at least for me. Um,
Yeah.
what about for you? How did you get into the Beatles? When was the first time you actually listened to them?
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, growing up in England and probably in the States as well. I mean, they're always going to be there. So probably the first songs I imagine would have been Yellow Submarine, probably when I was a kid. But although I don't remember, I don't think I watched the film. I have no memory of watching the animated film. There were just a couple of things that happened. I did a project at school when I was about 13 about the Beatles, and that kind of piqued my interest, but I didn't go full on for it. And then when I was about 14, I think my sister, this is the late 80s, my sister, this is of course when we made mostly vinyl with a little bit of cassettes here and there.
Okay.
CDs were just coming in, I think, at that time. But we used to do a lot of stuff as a family. I've got two older sisters, and we were all into music, the three of us. And my older sister, Marina, she just came with this record called Beatles Oldies and Goldies. And basically the background was it was the first Beatles compilation because they used to put stuff out every Christmas. It was a tradition. You know, the Beatles, not Christmas records, not Christmas themed records, but a Beatles record at Christmas, a new single and a new album. And in '66, they were working on Strawberry Fields and Penny Lane. They just quit touring. So there wasn't any product. So they brought out this Oldies and Goldies. And then, so 20 odd years later, my sister brought it to us and we put it on the record player. And I was just, I knew the Beatles. It felt familiar. You know, I knew She Loves You. I knew I Want to Hold Your Hand. But then I noticed that every single song seemed to have something like almost like a gimmick, but gimmick in a good way, you know, some hook.
Yeah.
For example, I Feel Fine, you know, it's got that feedback sound. And I noticed that their vocals seem to sound different every time. I thought, wow, this band, like every single song is different in some way. And then you kind of hear She Loves You is 1963, and then you hear Eleanor Rigby is 66. You think, oh my God, that's 3 years. And then you hear Strawberry Fields Forever, and it feels like some weird thing that's come from another planet.
Yeah.
A bit like Jimi Hendrix. I feel a bit like that about, because Jimi Hendrix was very into science fiction. That's a lesser known fact. So a lot of his songs have a kind of space quality, and the Beatles, it wasn't a space quality, but it just sounded like, they sound like some weird, particularly John Lennon, some weird guy from another planet somehow. And I think the fact that I didn't realize this at the time, but of course he used to have his vocals manipulated all the time with reverb and
I heard that.
double tracking.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I didn't, it connected with me, but I didn't really know why. And his was the voice that just hit me. Although interestingly, when you said John or Paul, a very interesting thing is that, I mean, basically, I got into them when I was 14, and for the next 3 to 4 years, current music just went out the window, and it was just full immersion. And I have these memories of being in the car. Like, obviously, my sister's a little bit older than me, but we'd be in the car, and after 6 months, they'd be going, "Oh, I like the Beatles. Can we listen to something else?" And I'm like, "No, this is solo Beatles. This is different." So it was just kind of full immersion.
Totally different.
The interesting thing is that I always just felt that John Lennon and Paul McCartney were perfectly equal, like different but equal. So it's funny, ever since I was 14, which is 30 years ago, I've never really had to have that debate with myself. I've just always thought they're perfectly equal.
Yeah.
Which is nice. So that's how I got into them. And then it's just a 30-year kind of love affair. And then when you've got through all the music around the 90s, you had Live at the BBC, which is a fantastic album, Beatles Anthology, and then suddenly, even after all that, then you go to YouTube and you've got isolated tracks. Have you heard any of those? Just the vocals on its own. It's just like,
I did. The isolated vocals on Strawberry Fields. I think it was like the first cut that John does, and you know what? Honestly, I think that one's on the anthology too. It's just John and a guitar, and he's playing Strawberry Fields. Yeah,
and then it segues into the final one, which is when you hear Ringo's tribal drumming just thunders in. It's incredible.
Yeah,
and in fact, just a little thing, like if you're ever listening to Strawberry Fields and you feel like, how is all that drums being done by one person? In fact, it's not. It's Ringo did a drum track, maybe even two, but there's a percussion track, which I think is in the right ear, but I can't remember. And it's actually 7 or 8 people all just whacking, getting
Yeah.
that kind of tribal sound. So again, it's just that's
Yeah.
the Beatles. There's always something different. There's always something innovative. There's always something to catch the ear, and
Yeah. Like
yeah, it's never faded, really, to be honest.
for a long time, I honestly thought, and this is well before I actually immersed myself into full becoming a Beatlemaniac in my early years. But I honestly thought that Paul McCartney was the only singer of, and this is like pre-YouTube,
Right.
only listening to them on the radio. Uh, there's a station over here in the States in Southern California called K Earth 101, and I remember they used to play like all their old songs from the Please Please Me album and with the Beatles, and like on like oldie stations, and I used to listen to them, and I honestly thought that Paul was the only singer within the group, and listening, and I used to just listen to them, and I would think, why does this guy? I didn't even know his name back then. I was like, why does he sound different on other songs? And it wasn't until years later that I found out that that John actually sang, and the quiet one, the lead guitarist George, he sang a couple of tracks, and the Beatles were so high enough to even let Ringo sing a couple of songs too on majority of their track or majority of their albums too.
Oh, I spy a Bill Hicks quote there.
Yeah.
Yes. The Beatles were so high they let Ringo sing a couple of tunes. Yeah. Very good. Yeah.
I'm glad I'm glad you
Paul
caught
McCartney.
that. Okay. All right.
Oh yeah, yeah. Bill Hicks and George Carlin are my comedy heroes.
Oh, okay, great. Oh yeah, this is gonna be
There's almost no one else. There's almost no one else,
there's
to be
gonna
honest.
this is gonna be a great conversation. Yeah, I am forever quoting George Carlin and Bill Hicks.
Yeah, yeah. I know in the sort of alternative circles, I mean, anything can become a cliche, can't it? If enough people say it, but it's become a cliche. But I go back to those two guys, and I just love it, and I don't love it for any reason. That I just love it. I don't love it because it just to be alternative. They just both said so many profound things.
Yeah,
There's a clip for anyone who doesn't know George Carlin. Towards the end of his life, I think he'd become so jaded and kind of cynical about the world, or the straight world. There's a clip called "The Owners of the Country," which I kind of get goosebumps every time I listen to it. And he
right.
kind of goes out of comedy, really, and just dispenses about 5 minutes of truth about how, you know there are owners of, I mean, he's saying about the USA, I could probably
Yeah.
equally say it about England. There are owners, and they own you, and they don't give a shit about you. And that's not to say that every politician is a crook. I think the political system, when you get in there, you kind of have to decide, like, you know you'd have to be very stupid if you're in the political system and you get anywhere near the top not to know how corrupt it is. So if you make the decision that you want to become president or prime minister, then you're kind of making a pact with the devil almost. Maybe honorable exceptions like Bernie Sanders, perhaps, but of course he didn't get there,
Yeah.
which could be why. But yeah, that's another story. But no, those two guys, I mean, they're just so many gems. They were both funny and very profound at the same time.
Yeah, and they both had these ideas in different they had the same idea, projecting it out in the same way through comedy. I forgot who said it, but somebody said that um, a good comic makes people laugh, but a great comic makes people laugh and makes people think at the end of the joke. And usually,
Absolutely.
Bill Hicks was great. He was funny. George Carlin, both funny. But when it doesn't really hit, that truth doesn't really hit you until hours later, or weeks later, or maybe even years later, and you're thinking, oh man, what Bill Hicks talking about, that life is just a ride, and
Oh yeah, love it.
you really think about it, and even I believe, quote me if I'm wrong, but John Lennon had something along the lines of it just of life being a ride, or life is just jumping into one car and jumping out the next, or something like that.
Mm.
He said, but um, yeah, even John Lennon had this very progressive way of thinking back in the
Mm.
'70s, and now I think about it and I'm just like, whoa, like this guy was so advanced in progression that people
Mm.
thought that he was just nuts and he was crazy, and he was just saying all these things just to say them. Like I was showing my partner one of his songs, and I I've, I can't remember what song it was, but it was him saying like, "Oh, I don't believe in Hitler. I don't believe in president. I don't believe
Yeah,
in Giza."
Kennedy, Jesus.
What was that?
Kennedy, Jesus. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's a song
Kenny.
called God. Song called God. Yeah,
Yes, that's what it was. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. That's one of my absolute favorites of his
Yes.
songs. Yeah.
Yeah, and she was just like, "What? What is he saying?" I was like, "No, like don't. I think you're just listening to the surface of what his lyrics are saying, but what he's trying to. I mean, what I'm trying to pick apart from it is that maybe just he doesn't believe in their ideas, but then at the end when he says, "I only believe in me,"
Mm.
and that's him talking about. I was just like, "Whoa, that's man. Nobody was doing that."
Yeah, and on that song, when he says, "I don't believe in Beatles," and then he sounds like a child when he's saying, "I just believe in me," and it's something about there is a bit of treatment on the voice, but you can't really fake that. That's
Yeah.
coming from him, and he has this thing that I think the thing that resonates really is that he makes you care about him,
Yeah.
and very few people have actually been able to do that in life. I mean. Um, I think Bill Hicks actually had a bit of that as well. There's a weird sort of humility to him. Don't think you get that with George Carlin, but um, Bill Hicks would talk about how lonely it was on the road and stuff.
Mm.
You know,
Yeah.
um, so it's this way that certain people have of personalizing, but saying things which are universal at the same time. And perhaps if we talk about John Lennon's solo career later, I think he kind of lost that ability at a certain point. But he had it up to the Plastic Ono Band, which is where that song "God" is, 1970. He really had almost perfected that, but I don't think he was doing it for commercial reasons. I think he was doing it because he
Yeah.
needed it.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, was that
Mm.
his first? What was his first album after splitting up with the Beatles?
I mean, his first sort of straight album, let's
Uh-huh.
call it, pop rock album was that one, Plastic Ono Band,
Oh, okay.
1970. And the world, in fact, got 5 Beatles albums. Well, no, funnily enough, 6. They actually got 6 Beatles albums that year. They got the Let It Be album, which had been recorded the year before.
Right.
And then they got a solo album from John, 1 from Paul, 1 from George, and 2 from Ringo. So they got, in 1970, the world got 6 Beatles-related albums, new ones, which isn't bad. He'd done some experimental, I mean, very, very experimental stuff. Very, very uncommercial music before then.
Yeah.
Which is sort of interesting in the ideas, if you think of it more as conceptual music. Um, but that was the first straight album, yeah. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, and Imagine, great album as well. Mind Games is an awesome album too, and yeah, I've heard you say on other podcasts, was it Plastic Ono
Mm.
is one of your favorites?
Yeah, I think sometimes I don't know if you find this, but when you actually do a show about an album or a topic
Mhm.
or a film or a documentary or whatever it is, sometimes it just grows in that period where you're researching it.
Yeah.
And funnily enough, sometimes it happens that we might be talking about a film because I guest on other people's film shows, and the film kind of gets better as you're talking about it.
Yeah.
You kind of whoever you're with is pointing stuff out to you, and you kind of think, oh wow, this is great. And Plastic Ono Band, I always loved it, but I think it just connected because I'm very, very interested in psychology. I'm very interested in therapy. Had some therapy myself as well, not primal therapy.
Hmm.
That's very, very heavy. I think you have to have very, very serious issues to even think about primal therapy, which they both did, John and Yoko. But yeah, it's just
Wait, hold on.
sometimes.
Can we rewind
Mm.
back and can you tell me what primal therapy is?
Yeah, well, what happened was around 69 or 70. I think it's fair to say that John and Paul both pretty much had nervous breakdowns as the Beatles was ending. You know, it was really their youth was ending, and John Lennon got in the post a book called The Primal Scream, which inspired the name of a Scottish band called Primal Scream. And I've subsequently read the book. Um, from what I can remember, primal therapy is essentially a therapy that relives childhood trauma. Now, I haven't read the
Oh,
book for
okay.
years.
Okay.
I haven't read the book for years, but this is only very surface. But the idea is that you go back to the repressed, sort of painful memory, and then you somehow resolve it. And sometimes that might be by screaming. That's where the primal scream comes from. But I've included some clips of Arthur Yanov and his wife Vivian. He was the one who gave them the therapy, and they said that you don't set out to scream, you set out to try and relive and heal the trauma. But what happened with John Lennon, what was interesting, was that he did the first part of the therapy, which was opening himself up. But for various reasons to do with, you probably know, they were trying to kick him out the US because of this cannabis conviction, and they were also had a custody battle to do with Yoko Ono's daughter by a previous marriage, and he wasn't able to resolve it. So he basically opened up all the wounds, but then he didn't get to close them or to achieve closure. But what he did get out of it, of course, was this amazing album. So you have to kind of think, as an artist, maybe he thought it was worth it because he got this incredible album,
Yeah.
Plastic Ono Band.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
He got some added material that he would have never experienced, and he turned that into art.
Yeah, when they went to India in '68 with the Maharishi, that was the first sort of break they'd had from the media and from the frenzy, and they were writing songs. And George Harrison at one point sort of turned to Paul McCartney and says, we're not here to write the next fucking album. We're not here to
Yeah.
write songs, but it was so conducive because they were kind of withdrawing.
Yeah.
They were. I think they may have smuggled a little bit of weed into India, but essentially they were drug free.
Yeah.
So they were having a withdrawal plus a kind of peaceful atmosphere, and it was very productive. And they all had their acoustic guitars, and they went back to being students, with acoustic guitars. And
Yeah.
Donovan was there, and Mike Love from the Beach Boys, and Mia Farrow was there. And so they wrote tons of songs. So you have to think, I don't know, if you're a professional musician, which I've never been, there must be a sort of creative or commercial side of you that's thinking, oh, wow, meditation's great, but I'm also written 30 songs. Wow, this is great. We got a double album
Yeah.
out of this. So you probably have to wear a couple of hats, I suppose.
I didn't know that. I didn't. So they went to India with Mike Love. I didn't know that. Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, I don't think they traveled with him, but
He was just.
they were actually. Yeah, he was there.
He was just there.
They were actually,
okay.
Yeah, this is a kind of lesser known fact. They actually went there I think they went on a teacher's course. So they kind of joined a course which was designed to teach meditation, to teach the person meditation, and then they would become a meditation teacher.
Okay.
I think
Gotcha.
that's right. I'm not sure if that's completely settled, but yeah, some celebrities came, and Donovan, Mia Farrow was there, and her sister Prudence, hence Dear Prudence.
Yeah.
Fabulous song.
What's okay? So do you know what songs did they end up coming out of after their India trip?
I mean, most of the White Album.
Oh, okay.
Most of the double album, plus a few other ones as well.
Gotcha.
So yeah, the sort of acousticy ones for John would be, Dear Prudence, Julia, I'm So Tired. Sexy Sadie is about the Maharishi. He actually wrote it on the way home because they
Oh,
got
okay.
disillusioned with the Maharishi, and it was originally Maharishi, what have you done? And
Mhm.
George said, "Oh, you can't write a song. You can't put a song called Maharishi. What have you done?" So they changed it to Sexy Sadie. What have you done?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Honestly, I'm gonna go back and listen to that tune and think about Maharishi. Yeah, I gotta
Mm.
do that. Yeah, anybody
It's
should.
kind of direct. Apart from the
Yeah.
title, it's quite. We gave you everything you own just to sit at her table,
Hmm.
meaning his table. So that's the thing. John did do this direct thing. Yeah, there's a lot of myths about John Lennon, but I think it's fair to say that he was pretty direct and
Yeah,
to the point most of the time.
yeah. There's myths and then also misconnections, and well, that's a very good segue into we were going to talk about is John Lennon a shithead? And I went back and listened to that. I watched that video again with Brian with concerts that made us. So we were talking about both of our experiences listening to the Beatles and different stories that we heard. And one of them was that I guess mistreat his children, and he mistreat like his first wife before Yoko. And I'm glad that you brought that up when we were emailing each other, and definitely there is some misconceptions about him. Maybe you can tell me a little bit more about go in depth of what uh, the truth really is.
Okay, here is the truth. No, here's a little bit of the truth.
Just a
I don't
little.
know it all. I don't know it all. Yeah.
uh,
Okay, so yeah, so the facts that we know,
mhm.
John Lennon was not a great father to his first son, Julian Lennon, who was born in '63, and unfortunately, he did a thing that, I mean, I don't have kids myself, but I guess a lot of fathers who perhaps had, um, let's say, bad fathers, or who had paternal figures that didn't fulfill what they wanted, they often unconsciously kind of pass it on when they have their own children. I think that's fair to say. Even though they probably want to do the complete opposite, some of it rubs off. It's just how these things go. So yeah, he was quite neglectful, and he was. There was a letter that was in that Cynthia Lennon had kept from about '65, and it's John saying, I've been a right bastard, and I'm so sorry that I haven't been there, and I've. Julian Lennon, unfortunately, if you listen to or watch some of the interviews, he had a rough time because John Lennon was. I think he's one of those people that could really cut you down with a few well-chosen words, and when it's your own son that you're doing that to, it's pretty rough. The other sort of charge against him in the cancel culture that we live in is that he was a wife beater. Now, Cynthia Lennon in her book said John hit her once or possibly twice. There was another woman who he dated at art college who said that he whacked her. So he probably did it a few times. This is not to give him a pass,
Yeah.
but John Lennon, everyone will tell you, including, I mean, I've actually been lucky enough to speak to people who knew him. Everyone will
Oh,
tell you
okay. Nice.
everyone will tell you that he was a bad drunk.
Okay.
And I've known people in my life. I've never hit anyone. I never hit women, but I've
Yeah.
probably been verbally aggressive to people when I've been drunk. I probably had a problem with that myself. We've all known people. I had a friend at school who, after X amount of drinks, I don't know, 5 or 6 drinks, whatever it was, there
Yeah.
was a point where it's like, the story of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
Yeah. Of
It's
course.
like Mr. Hyde, the
Yeah.
devil inside the person comes out. But I also realized with this, I won't name him, but my friend from school, was that I could see that like his eyes would get very unfocused, and he'd kind of go into
Yeah.
some sort of alcoholic frenzy, and he didn't know what he was doing, and he would be violent occasionally, but again, more sort of verbal aggression. So it's not to give John Lennon a pass, but I think it's fair to say that There are certain people who perhaps they have demons deep inside, and when they drink, they come out. And I'm sure John Lennon many times woke up the next day and thought, "Oh my God, what did I
Yeah.
do last night?" You know,
Yeah, of
we've probably
course.
all had that.
Yeah.
um, so, but my issue with this whole kind of cancel culture essentially is that I feel like, humans are social animals, but unfortunately, that often means that they will jump on bandwagons um, in order to belong, which is a perfectly natural human thing to want to do. But my thing really is, have you actually researched the topic, or have you just heard a bunch of stuff
Yeah.
and you feel like, oh, that sounds like fun, oh, John Lennon was a shithead, or
Yeah.
John Lennon was a wife beater and was terrible to his son. He was terrible to his son, but he was 24 at the time, and he was experiencing a fame that no one apart from probably Elvis Presley or perhaps Frank Sinatra had ever known. I mean,
Yeah.
no one had ever known that level of fame, really. So there's little kernels of truth there, but I would just say, if someone's just jumping on a bandwagon, I'm not sure that their opinion, everyone's entitled to an opinion, of course.
Yeah.
But I feel that there's just there's this weird Twitter thing of just piling on people. It's the kind of online equivalent of knocking someone to the ground, and then 1,000 people all start stomping on them, kicking them when they're down. And I feel a lot of it is that. Like, he was a flawed person, and he didn't hide it. He was very different from other celebrities, that he probably exaggerated the bad things about himself, whereas most celebrities try and hide the bad things about themselves. So that's the difference. So he probably went to another extreme. So yeah, to answer the question, there's kernels of truth there, but I think it's all a bit too simple.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
You know?
all in all, he was just like a regular human being with pretty much the same emotions that most people have, and he tried to deal with it in the way that he thought that was best for himself.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say, another kind of strand of thought nowadays, particularly with people who are interested in psychology, is sort of diagnosing him. And I had a guy who's actually a professional therapist on. If I could plug his podcast, fantastic,
Oh yeah.
Psychology in Seattle. I think he got pissed off with me actually, so he never answers any of my emails anymore. But anyway, it doesn't matter. He was on the show, and he made a kind of valiant effort. He said, "I don't want to diagnose John Lennon because I never knew him, and he
Yeah.
hasn't been around for 40 years." But essentially, he said, there was definitely a little bit of borderline personality. There's definitely some narcissism, which I would argue anyone in that position of extreme fame probably would have.
Absolutely.
And then there was probably a little bit of bipolarity and a little bit of depression. So there's sort of signs of various disorders, which is not to say that he had all of those things, but there's little bits. So I think he just maybe had a bit more of the extremes than the average person. So he might have been perhaps the greatest friend you'll ever have.
Oh yeah.
Again, a lot of people have said, but then he might be like a really probably quite nasty when he'd had a few drinks, or if there was any reason he didn't like you. So I think it's just a bit more of everything, really.
I never really thought of John Lennon being a heavy alcohol person. I've always thought of him as a heavy, maybe cannabis user, and from time to time a heavy, not even heavy, maybe just here and there. I'm gonna take a couple of tabs of LSD, of some acid. I honestly, I've never really thought about him having alcohol. As a heavy drinker, maybe a couple here and there, but nothing like
Well,
that.
I don't think he was a heavy drinker, but the problem was he didn't need much
Oh,
for the
okay.
demons. He used to drink this in the 70s. He was drinking these things called Brandy Alexanders, which is
Hmm.
brandy and milk. And I tell you, just to give you one story,
Yeah.
I got into Kahlua and milk.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
One.
yeah. I'm familiar with that. Yes.
Yeah, and the problem is it just tastes like milk. Like, it barely tastes alcoholic.
Oh,
It
okay.
tastes of, I don't know if Kalua's has it got coconut? It's got something coconut or some
Coffee.
kind of, Ah, it's coffee. Right. Yes. Yes.
Hmm.
Yes. Yeah. It just tasted like a kind of a cup of coffee with a little bit
Hmm.
of liqueur in it. And I think, I think on the day we did one of those all day. I think there was a soccer match on, football match, and we were out all day. And I probably had, I don't know, like 15 of them or something. But
Oh,
I didn't
whoa.
even. Yeah, but I didn't over the course of a long period of time,
Yeah.
and I kind of felt drunk. But the problem is they just go down. That kind of drink just goes down so well, and it doesn't really taste. It's not like drinking whiskey or brandy. I don't think
Hmm.
it's not like drinking like whiskey and coke or something where you can kind of taste it more.
Hmm.
So again, not to make excuses for him, but he was drinking Brandy
Yeah.
Alexanders, and he probably had 5 or 6 before he knew what was happening.
Yeah, they're good. Right.
Yeah,
They're they're good and dangerous if something's if you're sucking something down delicious like that with
yeah,
amount of alcohol. I mean, who's to say some brandy is like 99 proof? I mean, some of that alcohol content is very high. But yeah, no, not to make excuses, but I mean, like we were saying, like it's just like any other person uh, would
mm,
would do that, sorts of things. I
mm,
recently I was looking on some interviews on YouTube of John Lennon, and one that really caught me since we're on this subject of um of alcohol and drug use from John Lennon, and his interview with I believe it's John, was it Cavett? Oh, Dick Cavett. So which I'm gonna play right now.
yeah.
Well, we don't have much time left. Does anyone have any idea how much time we do have? Let me confirm quickly a couple rumors with you.
Yes.
One of them, has it ever been settled whether Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds was a code for anything?
It never was, and nobody believes me. I even saw some famous star introducing, I've forgotten who it was, introducing a Lennon-McCartney show, and it was Mel Torme saying about how Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds was about LSD. This is the truth. My son came home with a drawing and showed me this strange-looking woman flying around. I said, what is it? He said, it's Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. And I thought, that's beautiful. I immediately wrote a song about it. The song had gone out, the whole album had been published, and somebody noticed that the letters spelt out LSD. And I had no idea about it. And, of course, after that, I was checking all the songs to see what the letters spelt out.
Yeah.
They didn't spell out anything, none of the others, and it wasn't about that at all, you know.
They could do that with Eleanor Rigby.
But nobody
was,
believes, you see. Yeah.
Stood for
There was Henry
erotic
the
reading.
Horse in a song I wrote called Mr. Kite. The lyrics, which I got most of it off, was an old poster for an old-fashioned circus, you know, from the 1800s. And it was all about Pablo Fanke's fair, and the horse was there. And they said Henry the Horse was horse, which I didn't know anything about then, you know. And Happiness is a Warm Gun was another one, they said, which was banned on the radio. They said it was about shooting up drugs. And it was the front of a gun magazine which said, Happiness is a warm gun. You know, they're advertising guns. I thought it was so crazy that I made a song out of it.
Do you ever think of anything, I don't know if you knew Janis Joplin well or Jimi Hendrix
We
or
didn't
all,
meet,
but is
but
it...
she sent me a birthday tape on my birthday. Last birthday, Yoko asked all different people to make a tape for me, and she was one of them. And we got it after she died. It arrived in the post. That she was singing "Happy Birthday" to me in the studio.
What do you think could be done about drug overdosing in or out of the profession of
I
music?
think the basic
This is a good bit, isn't it?
thing nobody asked is why do people take drugs of any sort, from alcohol to aspros to hard drugs? And that question has to be resolved first before you think, well, what can we do for the poor drug addict? Why do we and you and anybody have to have these accessories to normal living to live? That means there's something wrong with society that's making us so pressurized that we cannot live in it without guarding ourselves against it. So it's that basic, the problem. I think if people are allowed to be a bit more free and express themselves, they wouldn't have to inhibit themselves by taking drugs to not be hurt. People take drugs and drink so as they don't feel what's going on around them. And
Total freedom for everybody is our goal, you know. That way, you know, it will be a utopia.
people are
Yes, if they
frightened
can
of
get it.
freedom. They think freedom, oh, there'll be excesses. Of course there would be excess to an extent, and then it would settle down. The way the porno films don't pull so many people in now. So what? It'll level out. And all forms of freedom will be the same as that. If people are allowed to be completely free, it will level out, and people would be less inhibited and not be frightened of each other, and wouldn't have to take drugs to prevent being hurt by each other.
We're almost
Don't
out of
be
time.
afraid.
Was that your house, by the way, in the film?
That's our house, yeah. I just wish to mention that my son visits me every weekend at that house.
Yeah, that I just after I heard him talking about how the question is not on I mean the question is why are people doing different drugs? Why are they trying to find an escape? And this dude was talking about this back in the 70s, and now we have programs in place actually for that now that are being are being standardized now in mental health. This dude was talking about it years ago, way even before anybody else. During the time where this was, let me see what year was this?
71. That was
71, right? So
yeah.
that was
50 years.
at the height of the drug war, the war on drugs in the United States.
Yes. Yeah, that interview was actually September 11th, which doesn't really mean anything except that anything that happened on September the 11th could or could not have some significance. But
Whoa.
it just happened to be September 11th,
Oh
1971.
shit! Okay.
But yeah, I've actually used that very clip, just that end bit, about 3 times. I use a lot of audio clips in the Glass Onion shows. And it's just so frustrating that, as you said, that is almost exactly 50 years ago, and we just don't move on at all. I mean, we take one step forward and then a couple of steps back, you know. And yeah, it's absolutely incredible. And I try and say this to people, and I try and put it in my shows, but I don't know. There still seems to be. I think like society as a whole has certain allergic reactions to certain things, and one of them is the idea that there's any conspiring going on between powerful people. You know, you get this kind of conspiracy theory. You know, it's a thing I just battle with all the time. You know, as I say to people, it's nothing to do with the moon landings or, I mean, JFK, all the evidence been destroyed. 9/11, all the evidence been destroyed.
Yeah.
It's destroyed immediately. So there's, you know, and nobody's even going to listen to that. I don't actually think it was an inside job, but my point is that there's certain allergic reactions that people get where they just shut the debate down immediately, you know. And things like drugs, you know, I've talked to my parents about drugs, and my parents are pretty open-minded, and a nice thing that's happening is they're getting more open-minded as they get older, which is cool.
Okay.
But you know, they admit, you know, they don't know anything about drugs. They just hear drugs, that drugs are bad. You know, they wouldn't know the difference between a joint and I don't know, a gram of heroin. It's probably not. They'd probably say, oh, okay, heroin's stronger and this one's not. You know, they might know hard and soft drugs, but yeah, that clip is fantastic. There's only one bit I don't agree with. He said happiness is a warm gun. There is a lyric that says I need a fix. So, you know.
Oh yeah.
And the Lucy in the Sky, I mean, it is a remarkable coincidence, but
It's
I have actually
the most remarkable. When I first heard I love this song. And I've always listened to it, you know, during different mind altering experiences. And when this is after that, and I heard like, you know what that song is really about, right? And I'm just like, okay, what are you talking about? It's Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. It's L, Lucy, S, Sky, and Diamonds. You know, D, LSD. And when I was like, what? Oh my gosh, hold on. And then I started looking at that song just a little bit different. And even Happiness is a Warm Gun too, when I heard the heroin story. And then I started thinking to myself, was John Lennon was he a user of heroin? I mean, I started to think of that.
Yeah, I think with the LSD, I mean, there was I've seen a picture of that painting that Julian
Oh,
Lennon
okay.
did.
Yeah.
And they even interviewed the girl called Lucy at his school. So that definitely happened. I feel like they probably just noticed it. They said, "Oh, Lucy in the sky with diamonds." And John and Paul, I can imagine them kind of winking at each other and saying,
Yeah.
"Oh, that's funny." It's like when they sang, "I'd love to turn you on"
Hmm.
in the same album, Day in the Life. They probably just thought, "Oh yeah, this is fun." Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah.
Kind of the mischievous.
Yeah.
They're creative and mischievous.
Yeah, they're playing with it, which brings me to my. I didn't add this on our list. I thought I kind of surprise you since we're in the realm of different theories and different stuff about the Beatles. What's your opinion on Paul is Dead in the in that conspiracy of Paul McCartney dying in, what was it, 1963? Was it? And what's your take on it?
Oh man, yeah, this is a tricky one. I mean, I don't think it's true. I just think it's I think it's probably a good example of the fact that I think that there are lots of things in history, both Beatles history and general history, that we've never been told. That there are things that go on behind the scenes, that in corporate boardrooms, in presidential, in the White House, in presidential meetings. I'm firmly of the Socratic opinion that wisdom is knowing what you don't know. And I don't think we even know a fraction of what actually goes on in the world.
Yeah.
So I think it works as a kind of some strange metaphor for the idea that things are not what they seem. I mean, I think the evidence against it is very strong in the sense of, I mean, there's lots of things really, but for example, I mean, his handwriting, you can get handwritten lyrics from pre-66 and then handwritten after, and his handwriting is exactly the same.
Okay. That's something I never heard before. Oh, but okay.
Yeah, and I
Okay.
mean, obviously, it would be a remarkable coincidence they happen to get a guy who can sing, who can write songs and sing.
Yeah.
But I mean, we don't know whether the Tavistock Institute perhaps did, I don't know, contribute some things to the Beatles songs. We
Yeah.
just don't know. I think it's a little bit. I think in a way it's kind of arrogant to think that you know everything that's going on. That's
Yeah.
kind of my feeling, and this is why, and I'm sure you share this. This is why the mainstream version of the world, the version of the world, if you get all your news from the BBC, CNN, Sky News here in England, I'm sure there's other ones in America.
And for our audience at home, Fox News and CNN and ABC7 and especially Fox News is very outspoken as opposing Democrats. Republicans have Fox News and Democrats have CNN. That's basically what they
That's
have.
it.
Yeah. Okay.
Or MSNBC, I suppose,
Yeah.
is the
Right.
polar opposite of Fox News.
Yeah.
But I just think if you get your view of the world, which I don't know about you, but I think unless you have like very, very hippie or alternative parents, you're generally going to grow up not nowadays. Like if you're the age of my niece, if you're a millennial, you're actually growing up with alternative news sources available to you. Now that's a minefield, of course, to try and get the truth. But if you're of my generation, you grow up, you just have a view of the world that you're just given, and you don't really question it, and your parents don't question it, and none of your teachers question it, apart from perhaps the one weirdo teacher who probably gets ostracized by all his colleagues for being a weirdo and having alternative ideas. But I don't believe that Paul is dead, but I think there is a really funny video. I don't know if it's still online, and it's a guy who's going up to people and presenting all the evidence. And this video just goes on and on and on because there's so many clues, which perhaps don't add up to anything. But I think there's a certain, well, just to go back to what I was saying earlier, there's an arrogance and there's a kind of smugness in thinking that you know anything about how the world actually works, because I really don't think we do, and I think it's very healthy and kind of humbling in a good way. I think to realize that. So I mean, when you see his brother on television in 1969, he said, "Well, I was having a cup of tea with him last week. That is my brother."
Yeah.
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 it just seems a bit. I'd be more inclined to believe 9/11 than that, to be honest. No one believes 9/11 because they think
Yeah.
like thousands of people would have had to lie, which is not true because things get compartmentalized and it wouldn't actually take
Yeah.
as many people. And of course, people have died. The same with JFK. Nobody knows unless you look for it. There's been loads and loads of suspicious deaths surrounding these events. So to answer your question, it kind of works for me as quite a nice. It's like David Icke's lizards. The reptilians theory.
Oh, okay. Yes.
I don't believe the theory, but I think the reptilians, whether or not David Icke meant it like this, is a perfect metaphor for out of touch elites or blue bloods. They call them blue bloods. We're red bloods and they're blue bloods. They've got different blood,
Yeah.
metaphorically
Yeah.
speaking.
Okay.
So I think it's a great metaphor, and it's almost a lesson as well to say that there may well be loads of stuff that we haven't even considered. So
Yeah.
that's my hot take.
The first the first time I heard about that, it was just passingly. I may have said it in that particular collaboration with the other podcaster, and it was while I was writing a paper on Elvis and the conspiracies around him still being alive, and I was trying to compare the two, and back then it was about like 10 years ago when I wrote that paper, and I passively mentioned it. I didn't go too in depth with it, but I didn't really think about it back then. So when I became, like we said at the top of this, Beatlemaniac, it's a light bulb went in my head. I'm like, oh, you know what? There's a conspiracy about Paul McCartney. I looked into it more. There's a film actually. There's quite a few films about it. There's thousands of videos on YouTube about this. So I went super heavy into this whole conspiracy thing, and then I just came out of it thinking, this is fucking nuts. Like, this is just the strangest thing. But then I kind of looked at it, and I came to the realization that these guys they're very in tuned artistically with everything that they did in their music and in their promoting, and their just very detailed on placement in especially the all their album artwork, after Yellow Submarine, shit. Why is it fucking escaping me now while we're talking about the Beatles? A Day in the Life of. Wait, remind me what album that is, please.
Sergeant Pepper.
Yeah, Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, and that album. Oh my God! Some days I'm just like, some days I'll just take like an extra hit of cannabis, and I'll just sit on my couch and just look at that album. I have it on vinyl. I just look at that, and all the detail that just goes into the album is just remarkable.
Well, I mean, just one little thing with the Paul is Dead. There's about three or four photos where if you look at Paul McCartney, someone's got a hand directly above his head.
Yes, yeah.
And I don't know, I don't know if there's anything to that or not.
Oh yeah,
But
there's a lot
when
like
you
that.
look at it,
Yeah.
when you look at it, you think, God, that is a bit weird.
Mm-hmm.
But again, like to give an argument the other way, like when the Beatles were doing the Let It Be, there's a new Peter Jackson film coming out.
Oh, there is. Okay.
Yeah, about Get Back, which is it's going to be a kind of revisionist version of what's considered the Beatles' sort of saddest period, or the album when they weren't getting on very well.
Oh, okay.
And you can listen if you're inclined to something like, well, what would it be, 90, 100, It's a few hundred hours. It was on YouTube for a while, and then I managed to rip most of it before it got taken down. You can listen to them hours and hours and hours of them rehearsing and sometimes just talking. And they're constantly going back to stories about Liverpool. Now, if that was William Campbell or it wasn't Paul McCartney, they would have had to
Yeah.
have coached him. That every time we start talking about Liverpool, here's all the stories you need to remember.
Yeah.
So, it's a very interesting thing, because what you learn if you do get into alternative stuff is people will say, oh, yeah, that's a coincidence. Coincidences happen. Why can't you accept that?
Yeah.
But then in other topics, not Paul is dead, but other topics, when you find like 20 or 30 or 40 coincidences, then you have to start to think, you can't really just write all of those off. And just what I was saying earlier. I think it's
Yeah. Well,
I consider all this a puzzle. It's like it's like a mystery.
Yeah,
the Beatles
exactly.
is a mystery. The world is a mystery.
Yes, and that brings me to what we were talking about at the top of this, about me thinking about myself, thinking that Paul was the main solo singer of the Beatles, was because of all the album artwork that I used to look at when I was in my younger days. I think it was Yesterday and Today, the single album that came out with Paul and inside the what was it, it was like some kind of one of those cases. He was sitting inside of it, right? Is Yesterday and Today? No.
Yeah, well, the original cover was obviously the one with where they've got the butcher's smocks and the dolls' heads and the
Yes,
meat.
yeah.
And that got withdrawn. Yeah, it's one there. Yeah, he's sitting in a packing case or
Yeah,
something.
there we go.
Like
That's what it was.
Yeah.
Like a suitcase or something.
Yeah.
And I used to think about it. I was like, why? And even in Yellow Submarine and Sergeant Pepper's that album with he was always the center of well, not always. I don't want to throw that absolute word out there, but he was. It seemed, at least to me, that he was at the center of everything, and that just played along with. I thought he was the solo artist of the Beatles.
Yeah, I mean, very broadly, you could say John
Yeah.
Lennon was probably the leader to about 65, 66. It probably evened out for a couple of years, and then Paul was the driving force
Yeah.
from 67 onwards, I'd say. Broadly, that's accurate, I think.
Yeah. But listening to your podcast, one of the latest ones, well, not one of the latest ones, but it was the actual deep dive about John Lennon. I still have to finish that one, but I loved the fact that at the beginning of your podcast, you actually did a guitar lesson,
Oh, yeah.
which was really
Done
cool.
that a few times.
Yeah,
I've done that a few times.
which was awesome. And not only that, you were playing some Beatles songs, but there's one song. Well, there's actually two songs that I really enjoy from the Beatles, and I want to get your opinion on these two. One is Real Love, which I wish that would have made it on some maybe Past Masters or any other album, but Real Love is one that I absolutely adore, and then the other one is In Spite of All the Danger.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, because it sounds like an Elvis song, though.
Eh,
In spite of all the danger. It sounds like an Elvis song that
Yeah.
trying to get to you. Da-da-da.
Yeah. I honestly, I wish that would have made it on an album, just like Real Love. I wish those would have made it like at least production value. I wish that's what I'm thinking. Like, I wish they would have made more of it, but it adds to the realness and the stillness of the time that they came out with those songs.
Oh, that's interesting, yeah, because In Spite of All the Danger was just a very early song that they did as a demo in 1958 and never played again, apparently. And then Real Love was one of the ones that was done for the anthology, which was a John Lennon demo from after they split up, and they added
Oh, okay.
to it. Yeah. So neither of those songs were actually in the canon, so to
Mhm.
speak. But yeah, Real Love. There's a few versions of that. There's a nice sort of solo acoustic one as well that John Lennon did.
With the one on the piano, right? He was using on the grand piano. That
Yeah, there's a
version I
piano
like
one
too.
and a guitar. There's a piano one and a guitar one. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
The version I like a bit is the piano one. I played all of it. It's hard to look for it on any other music platform, but I typically have to go to which I'm gonna put the link in the show description because everybody needs to check this out if you haven't done so. But yeah, I find myself going to YouTube and YouTubing that song.
Real Love. Yeah. Well, there's
Yeah.
there's one called Real Life.
Mm-hmm.
And
Oh,
these are
okay.
all These are all demos. He never actually brought these out in his lifetime. And then there's one called Girls and Boys, which sort of goes, all the little girls and boys,
Yeah.
which is basically the melody of Real Love.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's kind of, he had this weird tendency, particularly in the 5 years where he was kind of in seclusion, essentially not bringing albums out. He had a tendency to just combine songs and then put them together and create a finished song.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's lots of that flying around. There's hundreds of his acoustic and piano demos just everywhere. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I props to you, man, for that little guitar lesson. And when you started singing the songs, I was just like, whoa, okay, so this guy he talks about John Lennon, he talks about the Beatles, and this guy could fucking sing. Awesome.
Yeah.
I had to get him on. I had to get you on the podcast. We had to clear out the John Lennon being a shithead, which if you miss those parts, you need to go back to the middle of this podcast, and we cleared a couple of stuff up. And Anthony, this was awesome, man, and thanks for your time. I wish we can go a little bit more further into this, but where time is being constricted, my producers are looking at me and telling me that I need to wrap this up. But hopefully we can get you back on here again in the future when our schedules line up again, and that'd be awesome.
Yeah, sure. I mean, we've barely covered anything, have we? We've done an hour and 15. That's crazy. No, it's been really good fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
We've got to cover all the rest of this sometime.
Oh yeah, definitely. So
Drugs and psychology and all kinds.
yeah, so go ahead and tell us where we can find your amazing podcast and your website, all the stuff that you would like to share with us. So go ahead.
Well, yeah, luckily now there's a kind of a one-stop shop website, Antony without an H, Rotunno, ROTUNNO.com. And it's got, I have a blog, I have all my music. I said I'm not really putting out any music, but I recently remixed one of my old songs actually. So I'm still doing musical stuff, and I'm kind of in my flat here, occasionally play the guitar. And I recently discovered the cajon, which is a kind of percussion box, which was originally used for flamenco, but that's kind of fun. So I'm finding something new to do, which is concentrating on percussion and relearning bass, because I was a bass player way back. And then my podcasts, yet Glass Onion on John Lennon, Life and Life Only, and Film Gold. They're all there. And then I have a blog as well, which I don't add to all the time, but now and again when inspiration strikes. So yeah, thank you very much. It's been really good fun.
Awesome. Cool. So anybody that is inclined to check out Antony's website, go to the show description during this podcast. After this podcast, go check him out. Go check out all his awesome podcasts. And there we go. I think I'm just going to go ahead and let the theme play out here, Antony. And thanks for being here, and super appreciative of you coming on and talking to us.
You're welcome. and we'll do it again sometime.
Cool.
All right, all the best.
The Mindbuzz Podcast.